The town of Silent Hollow was aptly named. Nestled deep within the folds of the Greystone Mountains, it was a place where the sun struggled to reach, choked by the ever-present mist. The air always felt heavy, laden with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The townsfolk, weathered and hardened like the peaks that surrounded them, were a stoic bunch, their lives dictated by the rhythms of nature. Life in Silent Hollow had always been harsh, but it was their home. Generations had lived and died beneath the watchful gaze of the mountains, their stories woven into the fabric of the town. But something had changed. The mountains, once silent guardians, had found their voice. It began subtly, a whisper on the wind that many dismissed as the creaking of old trees or the howl of coyotes. But the whispers persisted, growing louder, more insistent. They snaked through the narrow streets at night, slithering beneath doorways and seeping through cracks in the walls. Fear, like the creeping tendrils of fog, began to settle over Silent Hollow. The whispers were unsettling, their tone mournful, filled with an ancient sorrow that chilled the very marrow. The townsfolk, their faces drawn and pale in the flickering lamplight, gathered in hushed groups, their eyes darting nervously towards the looming darkness beyond their windows.
The whispers were not constant, appearing in sporadic bursts that only amplified their unsettling nature. Some nights they were a low murmur, barely audible, a ghostly exhalation that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard them. Other nights they rose to a crescendo, a chorus of disembodied voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The townsfolk, their sleep disturbed by nightmares and a creeping sense of dread, began to avoid venturing out after dark. The once familiar streets now felt alien, filled with unseen eyes and listening ears. Fear, like a contagious disease, spread through the town, infecting even the most skeptical of minds. Old Mrs. Caldwell, her mind sharp as ever despite her advanced age, swore the whispers were the voices of the mountain itself, angry at being disturbed. She spoke of ancient legends, passed down through generations, of a darkness that dwelled within the heart of the Greystones. Her words, usually dismissed as the ramblings of an old woman, now carried a chilling weight. Then the whispers took on a new terrifying dimension. They began to speak names, familiar names, whispered with a chilling intimacy that sent icy tendrils of fear snaking down the spines of the townsfolk.
The first to vanish was young Billy Granger. One moment he was there, kicking a can down the street, his laughter echoing through the mist. The next he was gone. No trace of him remained, save for the lingering echo of his name whispered on the wind. Panic gripped Silent Hollow. Search parties were organized, combing the woods and mountainsides, their desperate calls swallowed by the oppressive silence. But Billy was gone, vanished without a trace. The whispers, once a source of fear, were now laced with an unbearable sorrow, as if mourning the loss alongside the grieving town. Then came the disappearance of Sarah Miller, a kind woman known for her warm smile and gentle nature. She vanished from her home, leaving her dinner half-eaten on the table, the chair overturned as if in haste. The only sign of her passing was the soft whisper of her name carried on the night wind. One by one, the residents of Silent Hollow began to disappear. Each disappearance followed the same chilling pattern, a name whispered on the wind, followed by an empty space where a loved one once sat. The town, once a place of quiet resilience, was now a breeding ground for terror, the air thick with fear and the unseen presence of something sinister.
Despite the growing fear that gripped Silent Hollow, a small group of residents refused to surrender to the darkness.
Driven by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a desperate need for answers, they banded together, determined to unravel the mystery that plagued their town.
There was Ethan Hayes, the town's doctor, a man of science and logic, who nevertheless found his rational mind shaken to its core.
He clung to the hope that there was a logical explanation, a scientific anomaly that could explain the disappearances.
His skepticism, however, was a shield, protecting him from the terrifying possibility that something truly sinister was at play.
Then there was Amelia Thorne, the town librarian, a woman with a thirst for knowledge and a deep connection to the history of Silent Hollow.
Armed with ancient texts and local lore, she sought answers in the past, believing that the key to the present lay buried within the annals of the town's history.
Joining them was Father Thomas, the town priest, a man of unwavering faith, yet deeply troubled by the evil that seemed to have taken root in his parish.
Torn between spiritual solace and the tangible evidence of the horrors unfolding around him, he sought to find a balance between faith and reason, praying for deliverance while acknowledging the darkness that threatened to consume them all.
And finally, there was Jacob Blackwood, a reclusive old man who lived on the outskirts of town, shunned by most for his eccentricities and his intimate knowledge of the mountains.
He was a man haunted by his own demons, his past shrouded in whispers and rumors.
Despite their apprehension, the others knew that Jacob held the key to understanding the darkness that had enveloped their town.
His connection to the mountains, his knowledge of their secrets was both terrifying and alluring.
Their search for answers led them deep into the heart of the town's history, to the abandoned mines that scarred the mountainside like open wounds. The mines, once the lifeblood of Silent Hollow, had been closed for decades, deemed too dangerous after a series of fatal accidents. Now they stood as silent sentinels, their dark mouths gaping like entrances to the underworld. Local legend held that the mines were haunted, the site of a tragedy that had befallen the town long ago. It was said that the miners, driven mad by greed and despair, had unearthed something best left buried, something that had awakened a darkness within the mountain itself. The whispers, they said, were the voices of the miners, trapped forever in their subterranean tomb. Armed with lanterns and a growing sense of dread, the group descended into the bowels of the earth. The air grew heavy and oppressive, the silence broken only by the sound of their own breathing, and the drip, drip, drip of water seeping through the rock. The darkness pressed in on them, a suffocating blanket that amplified every creak and groan of the aging timbers that struggled to hold back the weight of the mountain above. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and unsettling. It was the smell of forgotten things, of secrets best left buried. The mine shaft twisted and turned, a labyrinth of tunnels and caverns, some leading to dead ends, others opening into vast chambers, where the darkness seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. The air grew colder, the silence more profound, broken only by the distant sound of dripping water. Ethan, his rational mind struggling to maintain control, tried to dismiss the whispers as echoes, tricks of the mind playing on their fears. But deep down, he felt a growing unease, a primal fear that gnawed at the edges of his composure. Amelia, her eyes scanning the walls for clues, the beam of her lantern illuminating faded murals and strange symbols etched into the rock, felt a connection to the past, a sense that the answers they sought were close at hand. But the history she uncovered filled her with a growing sense of dread. These were not just stories, not mere legends, but warnings from the past, echoing through the years. Father Thomas, his faith tested as never before, muttered silent prayers, seeking solace in the face of the unknown. The darkness here was different, deeper, more profound than any he had encountered before. It felt alive, sentient, a presence that watched their every move, listened to their every breath. Jacob, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling light, moved with an unnerving familiarity through the labyrinthine tunnels, as if guided by an unseen hand. He spoke little, but his silence spoke volumes. He had been here before, had seen the darkness that lurked within these depths, and his knowledge filled him with a mixture of fear and grim acceptance.
As they pressed deeper into the heart of the mountain, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They were no longer merely names on the wind, but coherent voices, murmuring of their plight, of their unending torment. They spoke of betrayal, of greed, of a darkness that had consumed them, body and soul. The air grew heavy with the weight of their sorrow, the oppressive atmosphere threatening to crush the very breath from their lungs. The lanterns flickered, their light struggling to penetrate the gloom, as if the darkness itself was fighting back, desperate to keep its secrets hidden. Then they stumbled upon a chamber unlike any they had encountered before. The air here crackled with an unseen energy, the silence shattered by the echoing whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. In the center of the chamber stood a massive, jagged chasm, its depths lost in impenetrable shadow. The chasm pulsed with an unnatural light, a faint, ethereal glow that seemed to beckon them closer, promising answers while whispering of unimaginable horrors. "It was a portal," Jacob whispered, his voice hoarse with fear and awe. "A doorway between worlds, a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin."